This story begins with a shared dream of four friends fresh out of college who found internships in the heart of New York City. Excitement and slightly fearful ambition were in our blood, ready to conquer the world one internship at a time. Finding an apartment, however, became our first real-world challenge. The search for the perfect place to live was a whirlwind of cramped studios and overpriced rooms. Weeks flew by, and with each day that passed, our hopes dwindled. Just as we were about to give up hope, we stumbled across an advertisement for a spacious four-bedroom apartment in a historic sandstone building that was surprisingly cheap to rent and almost too good to be true. Out of desperation and curiosity, we scheduled a viewing. The day of the viewing was cloudy as if a rainstorm was coming, and as the four of us girls wrapped up in our trench coats and jackets and made our way through the labyrinthine streets of Greenwich Village, a sense of excited anticipation filled the air. We finally stood in front of an imposing sandstone house, its facade adorned with intricate brick carvings of curly grass and flowers containing four springtime girls and an old goat with horns, an image that has aged and become more than a little out of place and odd. Our eyes were immediately drawn to the address on the door, number 13. An involuntary chill ran down my spine. Number 13, though cliched, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. Nonetheless, curiosity overcame concerns, and we couldn't wait to follow the housing agent inside. The apartment was surprisingly spacious, with high ceilings and large windows giving the whole room a moody look. There was an atmosphere of faded grandeur, with whispers of history echoing through the creaky floors and the faint aroma of old furniture. However, something always felt off. The four rooms were separated by long corridors, far apart, which allowed for a great deal of privacy, but just sort of seemed out of reach. Outside the tall floor-to-ceiling windows there was a large tree that covered the sky, and an unsettling chill lingered in the air as the shadows from the swaying branches and leaves always seemed to dance around the edges of our vision before a rainstorm was imminent. Despite this strange atmosphere, the apartment had a unique charm that we found hard to resist. Maybe it was because the rent was cheap, or because the place was perfect for us to have both a partying hall and a bedroom that definitely wasn't cramped, so we decided to ignore our instincts and take a chance. We signed a lease that day, oblivious to the strange and disturbing chain of events that awaited us next. Moving day arrived with excitement and trepidation. We unloaded boxes full of hopes and dreams and turned the empty room into our temporary home. As we unpacked, we realized that the previous tenants had left behind some strange items. A silver-plated framed antique mirror stood silently in a dark corner of the living room, reflecting our nervous smiles with disturbing clarity. A dusty phonograph sat silently on a rickety table, its speakers pointing toward the ceiling as if frozen in mid-song. In one of the bedrooms, we found an old typewriter, its keys smoothed. There was also a faded old landline telephone on the floor in front of the living room window. Looking at the marks on the wooden floor, it turned out that there should have been a small coffee table there dedicated to the telephone. For us, the initial excitement of moving into a new home began to change into a growing sense of unease as the days passed. The trees outside the window looked like it always seemed like a sheep was repeatedly banging against the wall, and every floorboard creak made our hearts skip a beat. We tried to blame it all on our runaway imaginations, trying to convince ourselves that there was a logical explanation for the strange atmosphere. However, as darkness enveloped the city, our laughter faded and was replaced by an uneasy silence that amplified every tiny sound. Our first night in our new apartment was a night we will never forget. None of us dared go back to our bedrooms because the four bedrooms were literally too far apart. It was literally in the four corners of the house, all linked by corridors that needed to be turned in the middle. Standing in the bedroom doorway, looking out, there was only the long hallway disappearing around the corner. The four of us girls huddled in the living room, doing our best to hide the growing tension with weak giggles. The only light comes from a flickering lamp, long shadows dancing across the walls. We share stories of past Halloween pranks in an attempt to lighten the mood, but the air is still filled with unspoken fear. Suddenly, the phone on the floor rings, destroying the silence as if it were a gunshot. The sound seemed to echo through the apartment, reflecting back from the high ceilings and sending chills down our backs. We both yelled in unison, the phone closest to me, my heart pounding as I mustered the courage to answer it with a shaky hand. "Hello? Hello?" I answered, my voice almost a whisper. A raspy voice came from the other end of the line, sending shivers throughout my body. It utters one creepy word: "Be careful." The call hangs up before I have time to respond. A wave of goosebumps sweeps through my body, and I turn around to see my 3 roommates in a state of shock as their eyes grow wide, and they don't let out a single sound. The 3 of them involuntarily hugged each other, their eyes looking at me together, or behind me. May was the first to cry, tears turning her elaborate makeup into horrific black-eyed tears in an instant, and she couldn't speak as she pointed to the spot on the floor where the phone had been. My other 2 roommates screamed in horror, and I couldn't help but take a step forward to join them before turning around and realizing that there was no phone line to that phone at all. The lights in the house all went out at once when the damn doorbell rang, and so did the lights of the other neighbors outside the window. The world went black. 5 seconds later, there was a pounding on the door, and a deep man's voice shouted,
"Sarah! Kayla! May!"
Our hearts were pounding in our throats. I suddenly remembered that the voice was Kevin, our housing agent. I carefully squeezed out a very weak voice and said, "It's our agent Kevin, isn't it?" The 3 of them ran to the front door as if they had found a savior, using their cell phones to flashlight each other. I heard them run to the gate, which opened and closed. The girls' terrified cries suddenly faded after a few minutes, and my cell phone, which I had just dropped in my bedroom, was now huddled in place with darkness all around me. I heard Kevin's leather shoes on the squeaky wooden floor approaching my direction. A small candlelight finally cuts through the darkness. He came over and said, "I forgot to warn you that there will be a 2-hour power outage on Pan Street tonight, so send over some candles." My hanging heart relaxed. Being inwardly laughing at the timidity of our girls' fuss, I opened my mouth to ask Kevin, "Where are Sarah, May, and Kayla?" I saw Kevin's back twitch a little as if he was holding back a smile. After a few seconds' pause, he coughed and said, "They went back to their room to sleep." "It's so late, I'll send you back to your room too. Sleep and you'll be fine when it's light out." So he held up the candle and walked forward, signaling me to follow him. I had no choice but to move my heavy legs to follow 4 or 5 steps behind him. Just as I turned the corner of the hallway leading to my bedroom, the mirror in the corner illuminated a pair of sheep's legs and hooves walking past, and I tried to turn my head and run, only to run headlong into Kevin. I screamed. Pan Street No. 13's story continues. See you in the next episode.